I know people who dated 3 months and got engaged and they have had long, amazing marriages. And I know people who have dated 5 years or more and it was a total train wreck. So what's the balance between giving it enough time and just having wisdom in it and understanding that this is a sure thing? Okay, friends, here we are for this week's culture segment. You have heard this guy before if you are a faithful listener to the Boundless show. He is Bob Paul. Not only is he vice president of the Focus on the Family Marriage Institute, director and creator, co-creator maybe, of the Hope Restored Marriage Intensive program that now has multiple locations around here in the U.S. and has been around for over 20 years. But he is also a former professor, he's an author, he's a speaker. He tells great stories about his wife and her ability to set boundaries. And he is a marriage and relationship expert, obviously, on top of all that. So, Dr. Bob, great to have you back.
Oh, it's so good to be here.
Super fun for us. So all of you who are very angsty about the whole process of dating, engagement, and moving towards marriage, some of you write in and you're just like, I don't even think I want to date because it's so weird out there. And others of you are in relationships and you're constantly asking us, how do I know if this is working? What's a good litmus test for, is this, healthy? Is it not healthy? Well, Bob Paul is the one to ask. And we're going to talk to him today specifically about you're dating someone. How do you know that this has a chance of going the distance? Like you can actually pull the trigger on engagement and say, okay, I'm going with this one, selection made, we're going to move forward. And so we're super excited, Bob. And what's weird about this and what I was telling you before is that we basically, so much of what you do professionally is on the back end, like almost marriage crisis work. But I have attended Hope Restored. In fact, you were the therapist in the one that I had the chance to be a part of. And I've said this multiple times in talking to Bob and to you all. I feel like every unmarried person should go to Hope Restored because it gives you the tools that you need to figure out your own contributions, your own negative experiences, your own stuff in any kind of relationship, and take responsibility for you, So I think it's fantastic. So anyway, where you are on the back end and where you might be in crisis is going to inform some of the things you need to know going into a relationship and specifically going into marriage. And so kind of, Bob, where I want to start this is this idea of, I feel like our parents and grandparents have told us for years all these weird like adages about stuff, like these magic formulas of like how like if you know, and you find the one and all this stuff. And some people will say stuff like, okay, make sure that you date through every season, and that, or make sure you date at least a year, make sure that you do these 5 personality tests before you can make things happen. Is there any, let's just talk about kind of where some of those came from in the first place of like why this idea of being ready to be married. What's kind of behind that when people are saying like, oh, do you really know?
Well, I think that a lot of us growing up have been around relationships that really went bad. Mm-hmm. And I think that our loved ones tend to be afraid for us. They don't want us to make a mistake. Divorce is so prevalent. They don't want us to get hurt. So a lot of it is well-intended, even if it's not fully informed. But, I think they're just trying to protect us. And our culture has, as you well know, has gone to this point where it's sort of the attitude toward marriage has changed, where it used to be you found someone to journey with. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now it's like you get your life together and now marriage would be something that you would sort of add to a life that you
have.
Like
a capstone.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So it has changed quite a bit. But I think a lot of times people are just trying to protect us, and they're trying, this is what we've seen works and what doesn't work, and they don't necessarily have a lot of good stats or information behind it. It's just their own personal opinion coming from their fears.
Yeah, which is so interesting because I was talking to an older couple at church just the other day, and they were saying exactly this thing, kind of what you were saying about this journey. I remember the wife was like, I don't think we didn't know a thing about what we were getting into. I don't remember really asking him good questions. I don't remember figuring out like all these character things. I figured, okay, well, I'm going to marry this guy and we'll just take it as it comes. And maybe it was, I think when you were referencing culture, Bob, it seems like, say you go back to, 40, 50, 60 years ago or whatever. It seems like everyone kind of had these similar values. And so you could just latch on to someone and you'd figure it out together. But now there are so many things playing into whether it's a family of origin story or mental health issues, mental illness, previous marriages, a lot of stuff that people are bringing into relationships. Do you think that is playing into why there is such tension and fear around pulling the trigger?
I think so. I think that most of us, maybe all of us, have seen so many marriages dissolve and so many disasters. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid growing up, which was a good while ago, my parents got divorced when I was a year old. Mm. I was an oddball in my school, being a kid from a divorced family. Almost nobody I knew had divorced parents. Yeah. Nowadays, you're more of an oddball if you're from an intact family. Right. So we've grown up watching marriages dissolve and disasters all around us, and these, not standard nuclear families anymore. There's all these blended families, and it makes people gun shy. It's like, I'm afraid, how do I avoid that mess? I don't want that to be the case.
Yeah. Okay, so give us a few examples here, because hopefully everyone has their, iPads out or a pen and paper or whatever. What are a few things that you've seen, and again, both premarital, but then also looking on the back end as people are struggling in marriages? If you had to pick just a couple things on either side, things that couples way over prioritize heading into marriage, like I'm going to die on this hill, this is so important, if I don't have this, whatever, and things that they tend to overlook. Like, what are we not prioritizing enough as things that you would say, you better figure this out, or this better be something that you share or have commonality on? And then what are things that they get super angsty about that you're like, that's something that's not a predictor of failure or divorce or whatever?
Well, one of the things that I think that, we've had a tendency to romanticize marriage and relationships to such a degree, it's that happily ever after kind of thing, that oftentimes we are looking for the buzz. We want that charge, that infatuated charge to be there, and we're hoping that'll last forever. And sometimes people overemphasize that. So for instance, I remember when I was younger, I was working as a waiter. And we had a bunch of us that were standing around talking. We had a few minutes that were kind of dead, and we had a gal that came in, and she was so excited because she finally realized she had met Mr. Right. And here's how she knew. She said, last night he kissed me for the first time, and my toes tingled. Oh. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe your shoes were too tight. Yeah. That's what told her that she had met Mr. Right. Now, that obviously is not wisdom. Mm-hmm. But other times people are so afraid, they're taught that they need to go through, like you said, all these seasons and so forth. But what they don't know is, what does it mean to have a healthy relationship? What does that look like? Now, I went into my marriage, Lisa, thinking that I was looking for my happily ever after partner. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, Jenny and I had this in common. She actually led me to the Lord. I accepted the Lord the day before our wedding, thank God. Mm. And I went into this recognizing that this was a covenant, not just between me and Jenny, but between me and God. So we had the faith piece in place. We brought so much baggage to the party that it was challenging, but that faith kind of held us through. Mm-hmm. And what I realized finally years later was that when I picked Jenny, really, I was not picking my happily ever after partner, because sometimes life's tough and those moments aren't happy. I was picking my journeying partner. Mm-hmm. This is the person, this is going to be my friend that I'm going to walk through good times and bad times, difficulties with, and we're going to seek God and have God help us find our way to have a relationship where the friendship is really something that's growing. And at this stage of the game, there's no doubt, Jenny is my best friend. And we have a relationship that thrives because of that.
Yeah, that's good. What does it look like, though? I mean, because I would have said, and I don't know if Jenny thought this, or like you said, you brought all this baggage in. When, Greg often says this, Greg Smalley, we've had him on multiple times, where he says, we often talk about, oh, well, this person at their core isn't going to change. But then Greg argues that some things will change, like different opinions about things, different habits, different whatever. How do you know? I mean, was that scary for Jenny, being like, is this guy even for real? He just accepted Christ yesterday. How did she know that she signed up for a sure thing? Or maybe she didn't. Did you have conversations around that?
I don't think she did. The thing that that Jenny had going for her that I think helped her manage was that she had a really tight relationship with Christ. And she wasn't making this decision on her own. She felt the Lord led her. Matter of fact, we almost broke up a month before our wedding date because we went, here's an interesting story I don't tell very often, but we went to premarital counseling. I wasn't a believer. I didn't care who actually married us, and she wanted this pastor guy who I knew, and I thought he was fine. But he required premarital counseling. I didn't know what that was, but hey, I'll go.
Yeah.
One session. And this is what happened. Started talking to me, very kind, very, engaging, asked me a lot of questions. And then the conversation turned to her, and it took an ominous turn. And he started talking to her about something that I didn't know what it was. He started talking to her whether it was a good idea to wed out of yolk. Now, I'm a city boy from LA, and I never heard that term except in reference to eggs. I had no idea what he's talking about, but I could tell the conversation was going bad for me. And he got her really questioning whether she should marry me, not being a non-believer. So we went back. She consulted God. I watched this happen, which had part to do with, I saw God sweep in the room, and I didn't know what that was. The Holy Spirit came through. But she felt the Lord said, here's the circumstances under which I'm okay with you marrying, and I actually would even encourage you to marry Bob. And we set that out, and it's a series of things that led to my accepting Christ as my Savior. But she was feeling very much that God was in this, and God was guiding her. And all the way through, even through our multiple difficult times, she was able to lean back into that and lean back into the Lord and say, okay, this is hard, this is painful, Lord, I need you with me. What are you wanting me to do here? So I would say that that's a key thing. And ideally, if you find someone of faith that you can walk this out with, that you have a good friendship with, and then you can see yourselves as, hey, we're going to journey together, we're going to grow together, we're going to learn together. That's the ideal.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and I'm guessing that now she maybe wouldn't just blanket recommend like, hey, ride this till the end with a guy who you don't know where he's committing his life to the Lord. I mean, that was a pretty supernatural intervention of the Holy Spirit in your life to make that decision.
I would say that both of us are encouraging people to be cautious. But it's interesting, even at Hope Restored, people come to us and their marriage is in a disaster, and we will never tell somebody they should get a divorce. And we will never tell them they should stay married. What we tell them is you need to sort this out with the Lord. You need to let him give you guidance on that. And whether you stay or whether you leave, that's between you and him. It's a very personal thing. Now, obviously, God is going to want to encourage people to walk this out with him. But she'll do the same thing. She'll be, we lived together before we got married, which I don't recommend because it gives a very false sense of what it's going to be like when you get married. And what we experienced before marriage and what we experienced after was night and day different. So, okay. But and she would recommend against it too.
Okay. Now, what about time dating before you move to engagement? Because I know people who dated 3 months and got engaged, and they have had long, amazing marriages. And I know people who have dated 5 years or more, and it was a total train wreck. So what's the balance between giving it enough time and just having wisdom in it and understanding that this is a sure thing?
To your point, I've had plenty of encounters with people in the same thing. People who got married at a point so early in the relationship it seemed reckless, but they had great long-lasting relationships, and people that dated for years and years and were in my office in crisis. So I don't know that there's a time frame that's actually right. I think that either can work. I do think not necessarily that you go through all the seasons, but I do think that it's a good idea to experience somebody in a time of challenge, because of all the time that you're dating, everything is rosy.
Yeah.
You have no idea how that person is going to handle a challenge or a crisis.
Yeah.
And to see what they do under those circumstances, where they go, how they manage it, can be very revealing. And you can't predict those things. So, I don't know how to gauge the time frame, but I do think that what many people don't do is pay attention to the warning signs, the red flags. Okay, they are in love, or they've got those hopeful expectations for the future, or they know that God will change me and change you and so forth. So things come up that would warrant a pause and maybe a discussion, but they avoid that. They just write it off, and they just want to give person grace and the benefit of the doubt. When those kind of things come up during dating, those are the kind of things you want to talk about, or get some help to talk about. Hey, what was going on with you around that? Or what was that about? Because that was kind of awkward. That was uncomfortable. And don't just blow it off. Don't just assume nothing's there, because this is a person that you're going to be involved with through all sorts of different times and challenges. And if you haven't taken some time to figure out how to work through those things, those can be real sticklers.
Yeah. I often hear people criticize like premarital counseling because they feel like it might be a little too surfacey or brief. They say, well, we did one session on money, one session on sex, one session on in-laws, and just boop, sign the paper and check the box. What, especially when it comes to involving other people in the process, what are some things that you really should have outside eyes on to help you with these red flag things? Because I know people have dated and it's just like, blinders are on, they're super infatuated. Now it's like, and then people might even raise questions and they're like, well, you don't know him like I know him, and all of a sudden it's like, I don't think they're going to listen to anyone. But what should couples proactively ask for feedback on, would you say, from trusted advisors, friends?
Well, it's interesting because theoretically, even though I really love premarital counseling, I hate doing it because I go to a premarital counseling session and what I want to do is say, okay, here's what I've learned. This is, when I see couples who are struggling, these are the things that they didn't deal with that they needed to deal with. And so often the young couple looks at me with stars twinkling in their eyes and they go, oh, but that won't be us because we're in love. And I want to gag at that point and say, okay, I'd rather work with you 6 months after you're married than 6 months before. I think that it's important to get some help around communicating about deeper topics, more intimate topics, fears perhaps, pains, things of that nature, difficulties. It's good if you don't have an easy conversation about what's our goal for the future? What's your goal for the future? What are you wanting this relationship to be? What are you wanting, what do we want? What are you wanting to accomplish in your life? And does that jive with where I want to go and where I'm feeling led? Those are the kind of things that, if you have difficulty with conflict, those are the kind of things that are really important to get some help with, as opposed to just assuming, well, in time we'll sort it out. If you want to seek some guidance on that.
That's good. Now, what would you say? Let's talk a little bit about the difference between what I would call just cold feet, as people say it, and then something that really should be cause for pause, in the sense of, like, I'm just going to tell on my sister because who knows, hopefully she won't listen to this. But so her husband, they dated like, I don't know, I think they knew each other 8 years and dated 5 or something. And his whole thing of dragging his feet was he was waiting for her to become his mother, who like wrote and led Bible studies, was basically Martha Stewart, all this stuff that my sister was not. And I guess he just thought that with time, she would become that. Well, so she had to give him an ultimatum and just say, we're done. And then he realized like, oh, well, I actually do want to marry you. So now it's worked out. But like, so that's just a weird thing, like expectations of just like, okay, clearly he was dragging his feet because he had this ideal. But other people, it might be like, no, this is like actually the Holy Spirit, or this is a real reason why this maybe is not a good thing. How can someone discern the difference between the two? Because I think a lot of people try to poo-poo something and say, oh, that's just cold feet. Everyone has that. And next thing you know, you're sitting signing divorce papers.
So obviously we're talking about the extreme of people waiting a long time as opposed to those that rush headlong into the situation.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a good idea to have some really heart-to-heart conversations about how do you feel about commitment.
Yeah.
What are you afraid of? What are you waiting for? Those kind of things would be good to actually flesh out and talk about. Hey, we've been together for quite some time. Where is this relationship going?
Yeah.
Those are hard conversations to have, but they're really important conversations to have, especially if one of them is feeling like, is this ever going to go anywhere? And the other one is kind of like, I'm afraid to make a commitment. You want to know that. Okay, tell me what you're afraid about. What is it about a commitment that's scary for you? And have a real heart-to-heart conversation. It'd be nice if you could do that before it had to become a threat or an ultimatum.
Yeah.
But
right.
to just say, hey, what's really going on with you about that? I just want to know. I want to understand what you're dealing with here.
Yeah. Which is funny because then it put my brother-in-law in the position of he had to make a grand gesture because she was, incommunicado. She was out at the opera in San Francisco with her friend, and he had to come and like run up the stairs and do this whole thing to like win her back, which is a great story in and of itself. But I guess he also had to convince her, like, I'm not requiring you to be my mother. So somehow they had to have that conversation, I guess. But so it's so interesting to me because you're mentioning commitment. And it just dawned on me as you were saying that how that's often a not very sexy conversation to have. Like, are you really committed to this? We all want to talk about our feelings and about how amazing the other person is. But really, I see so many young adults trying to orchestrate a relationship that is nearly perfect, and they think that's their fire insurance for anything ever going south, rather than saying on the front end of this, I'm going to just choose to commit. I'm going to choose to walk through this with you. I'm going to choose. Is that a conversation that young couples can have? Like, what does commitment look like to you? I mean, I don't know. Is that in a counselor's office, or how do you start that conversation?
If you can't have that conversation without help, get help. But yeah, I think it's really important. What does commitment look like to you? What are your expectations?
Yeah.
It's good to be realistic about the fact that the relationship's not going to be perfect, that there is going to be an ebb and flow of passion. There's going to be moments where it seems kind of mundane and dull, and there's going to be moments where something's going to happen and there's going to be a spark, and that's normal.
Yeah.
That's just healthy for it to have an ebb and flow. You can't sustain that infatuation and that spark. It can't always be there. It exhausts you.
Yeah.
There's going to be the mountains and the valleys. And can that be okay? All right, what are you wanting? What would it mean for us to walk together and to get some help with thinking about that? Again, for me and Jenny both, our ultimate goal in life is to become more increasingly conformed to the image of Christ. Okay, I'm at the age where I finally realized there's not enough days left in my life to pull it off. So I'm going to be a work in progress till the day I die. I am Jenny's greatest cheerleader for her on that same journey, and she is mine. And we're not dealing with the same issues. I mean, the things that I'm needing to grow in are not the same areas that she needs to grow in. And we're able to be there for one another. We've got each other's back. We're able to encourage each other. And at moments, we have to stand back and take a little space and give each other a little space because, we can step on each other's toes. And we've learned to be okay with that as a normal part of any healthy long-term relationship. We've just accommodated that. And if you can have that mindset up front and know that's what a real healthy relationship is, you're not blown out when there's a change and you go around a corner and see something you didn't expect or experience something you didn't expect.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And kind of as we finish out here, I would love to just ask you this. I mean, I know you last year wrote a book, Empowered to Love. And this is one of the hallmarks of your Hope Restored intensives as well, which I think is so helpful. It is understanding yourself, taking ownership of yourself, your behaviors, your emotions, knowing how you show up in a relationship rather than going into this "you complete me" business, nonsense of this person's going to fill all the holes that you have from your family of origin and stuff. What if you're thinking that through and you're talking maybe right now to someone who's not even dating yet, or maybe they just started dating, are there predictors of marital success that might be something in the very early stages of dating that someone should look for? I mean, I'm assuming the commitment. I feel like you started by just saying, is this a person who is willing and capable of committing is, one of the top things. Is there anything else that, to keep people off of these therapy couches in the future, put you out of business, what else should a young dater have in mind?
My dream ideal is someone who has recognized that what it means to be an adult is to take full responsibility for me, for my well-being physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. Okay, and have embraced that 24/7 for the rest of my life. Now, I want to have that in process when I enter into a relationship, and then we add to it, caring for the relationship, investing in, nurturing the relationship. But I went into the relationship a card-carrying codependent. I really thought the goal was to hand my heart to Jenny, for her to take care of my heart, and for her to hand her heart to me, and me to take care of hers, and then we could live together in perfect codependent bliss. That is a bad idea. That's a fantasy, and it can't work in real time. So now that I take real good care of Bob, so I can bring the best me to her and to our marriage, but I also support Jenny and I nurture the relationship. And if you look for someone that understands those three areas and those three commitments, and those two people get together, it is the best setup for success.
Yeah. So true. And that's why in the show notes, y'all, you're going to see we're going to link to Empowered to Love. We're going to link to information about Bob, even Hope Restored. This might be something that you are a married couple listening and you're like, this might be something I'm in a real struggle in my marriage, or you might have a friend or a family member who could benefit from Hope Restored. So we're going to make that available to you as well, all the links and information about that. Bob, thanks so much for being part of the conversation.
I always love talking with you, Lisa.
We love it.